Hi, this is Namrata Panwar. I am here on behalf of Booking.com. I am the Senior Product Manager and I will be talking on A/B testing for new products. Before we move on, I'd like to give a bit of introduction about myself. So this is me with longer hair, and I'm originally from India. And currently I'm working as a Senior Product Manager with Booking based out of Amsterdam. In all, I have 8 years of experience, and currently I'm working in the partner-facing products, which means that we are looking at onboarding partners, and looking at the performance and the pricing point for home life partners, essentially more like Airbnb partners. So this is a completely new division for our company. Before this, I was working on customer-facing products in different capacity in e-commerce setups, in e-commerce startups. I started my career with Reliance Industries, and I've also worked in mobile apps, so basically all sort of platforms. Personally, my hobbies are traveling, adventure sports, and decorating my new house. So this is a picture of my new house in Amsterdam. As you can see, it's on the ground floor of this building. And yeah, that's what I'm up to in 2020. So moving forward. I quickly want to go through the agenda that we will be addressing today. The first 2 points are more of for basic and beginner level product managers, which are basically talking about A/B testing, what and why, and the new versus existing product development cycle. The last 2 bits, which are point number 3 and 4, are a bit more for the intermediate level product managers. It's basically talking about how we can use new product development framework for launching new products. So we're going to look at qualitative data and some steps to NPD testing. In the end, we will do a small recap to basically go through all the things that we talked about in a short summary. Okay, so let's start. What essentially is A/B testing? A/B testing is a tool for teams to run experiments in order to improve and meet their goals and objectives. So I'm going to straight away start with an example. As you can see here, there is a base version of a flight engine's search results. So here I chose Amsterdam to Bombay as a start and stop destination, and these are the search results that I get from that search engine. Here I'm calling it Control A, as this is what all users see in a default setting. What A/B testing does is actually introduces one small change or one big change from the base that is different and provides a different version for its users. So A/B testing is actually showing 2 or more versions to different set of users and that are chosen randomly. In this case, we've actually split our audiences in 50-50. So 50% of the users would see my base version, here what we call as Control A, and 50% of the users would actually see variant B, which is the second version. The objective of this test is basically to choose which is the winning variant based on a hypothesis. Now, for this example, the hypothesis would be that by introducing a loading page before the search results of a flight, we want to increase page views. Now, this is an interesting example that I wanted to share because as opposed to contrary belief, most users don't want to wait to look at some kind of results, especially when it comes from a search engine. But in this case, what we see, variant B was actually the winning variant. And this was surprising because this actually tells a bit more about user psychology. In this case, by introducing this artificial delay of a buffer, we were conveying this sense of trust to the users. The users felt that the search engine is actually fetching results from multiple locations and finding out the best deal for them. But when in reality, these results are actually are almost real time. They're pretty straightforward, and the search results are actually loaded in quite a jiffy. So this artificial sense of delay actually helps create and build more user trust and increases page views. So that was an interesting example that I wanted to share. So in this example, let's look at this slide. On the left-hand side, we are seeing Netflix. Netflix uses A/B testing quite a bit as a platform to really personalize its product for its users. Here we can see landing cards as an option. So landing cards are essentially small previews that you see on any kind of content, which basically gives you a preview of what is going to be the show about the show. In this case, what Netflix does is it chooses a range and variety of images to actually resonate with the right set of kind of user. As we might know that a 20-year-old might choose a very different image or might be excited and attracted to a different set of image as compared to a 60-year-old person. So using A-B tests to really identify which profile actually suits best for which kind of picture is what A-B test can be a great example for. On the contrary, on the right-hand side, we see an example from Booking.com. Here, what we've done is we've actually, the variant, which is the one below, we have changed a small copy change and try to give a sense of progression to our users so that when users are landing on this page, they are able to continue their registration where they left off. Surprisingly, this was a very small development effort that only changed copy, but it led up to a 10% increase in completion rate of the registration. So as you can see, there can be various applications of A/B test in different scenarios, and most of the product companies use them to improve their offerings to users. Moving on, let's address why do people do A/B testing. The first and foremost thing is to really understand user and solving user pain points. So let's assume that you actually launched a new feature and you see a drastic reduction in number of users using the feature. And that could be a very good indication that there is something wrong with your product and that your users are not happy with it. It also helps you to introduce low-risk modifications. So one of the beautiful things about A/B testing is that you can easily start and stop these A/B tests at any point of time. So let's say you're already running a test and you're not really happy with the results that you see and the impact that the feature has on your audiences. In that case, you can quickly stop the experiment and that can be easily undone. So these things can actually help you prevent a disaster by actually identifying the small anomalies using A/B testing. The last one, which is about introducing feature and feature changes, is an interesting one. Generally, as product managers, we tend to copy-paste features or successes of different products to our product. But in most cases, a feature that was successful for one product doesn't really mean that it will be successful for the second product as well. For example, all the features that Airbnb doesn't necessarily always work with Booking.com users because we have different type of users and different needs from those users and different pain points that we want to solve for them. And in that case, we don't want to assume anything and we don't want to copy paste features, but we really want to test them and see whether these new features that we're introducing are adding value for our users. So that's another reason why we need to do A/B tests. But the last and the most important one is actually to remove biases. When I started A/B testing, it was interesting to find out that a lot of the great ideas that I had weren't very successful. And I think that is a journey for every product manager, that when they start working with A/B testing, they really realize that they aren't as great a PM as they thought, because when they actually put it to test, a lot of the A/B test and the data actually says that these ideas were failures. So you think that you're a great PM, but actually A/B testing helps you realize and keeps you grounded that you're probably not one of the best there. So moving on. Let's talk about the typical product development cycle. I've tried to keep it very high level and broken them down into 4 different phases. They should be pretty self-explanatory, but let me describe a bit about each one of them. The first phase is ideate phase, where you do most of your brainstorming with you and your team members. The second step from there is you take those ideas to design and development, where you are actually wireframing, mocking up, researching, and validating whether those ideas will be successful. From step number 2, you go to the third phase, which is launch and iterate. Here is where you talk about market fit and whether your product is going to scale well and be adopted well by the users. here is also where you do majority of your A/B testing, because now that the base is launched, you will be able to iterate and make the best improvements in your product. And the last and the final stage is maturity. So maturity is actually reached when your product reaches a certain level of stability, where it is in itself driving a lot of revenue and is a machine that is running on its own. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance. At the same time, it is continuing to work well. So that's overall the product development cycle. One thing to notice here is as you move from step number 1 to 4, you would see lesser ambiguity because the product gets more and more well defined. And in addition to seeing lesser ambiguity, you would also have more experience as a product manager and as a product team to work on that topic and understand more about the product. So this is the overall product development cycle. However, this product development cycle actually differs from the type of products that you're looking at. So when we are comparing product development cycles, there are two types of products that we can look at: existing products and new products. What I've done is used the diagram in the last slide and mapped it in a different timeline format. What we mean by existing products, and I think 70% of all product managers and product teams are actually working in this space, where they are actually working on a product that already exists. It is a product that already has a reasonable user adoption, and that's why most of your time is actually spent between the launch and the maturity phases. That's the red box that just appeared. So the focus for this red box is on speed, and most of the product teams are trying to fail fast. By what it means by that is that they're really trying to optimize the user experience and use all of the time to really move faster to improve an existing product. To test and improve your product in this phase, A/B testing is the best way to move forward. The reason why is because you have a base to start with, like in this case, Control A, which is the blue colored box. You already have the base at the time of the launch, and as a product team, you're handed over this product to really go and play with. Then you move on to actually defining different type of tests and hypotheses from which you can actually run A/B as well as multivariate testing. Multivariate testing is a version of A/B tests which has more than 2 variants. So in this example, you can see that instead of 2, we have 3 variants, the red and the green. So essentially, the traffic gets split instead of 50-50 into 33%. You can go ahead and split it by 4, 5, 6 or more if given that you have good traffic and good users on your website. Tiny optimizations can have a big impact. Just because you are iterating and having small iterations doesn't mean that you cannot provide big impact or drive big changes for your product. A very good example that I can come up with is the Microsoft Bing 2012 product change that they made, which was actually done by a developer, where they changed the search engine display and how ads are getting displayed on the search engine. Based on that tiny experiment, they actually saw an increase of 12% revenue. And this 12% of revenue increase was so abnormally high that it actually rang a lot of alarms and alerts in Bing's office. And that was quite a success story. So that's also one very good example of how even small step iterations can lead to high impact if they are right changes and if those changes are done well. As opposed to existing product development, there is the new product development. And 30% of more mature product managers actually are working in this space. In new product development, you are establishing a new base of a product from scratch. So you are really trying to solve new user problems that were not solved previously. In this case, you as product manager will be spending most of your time between the idea and launch phases. And here you are really thrashing out details and getting your product definition right. One thing to note in this phase is that there is no base for traditional A/B testing. And most often, we do not really have any ways to do traditional A/B testing in these phases. Some examples of what new product development means is completely new to the world of products. So for example, Polaroids, those were some things that did not exist at all before they came into market. Another example could be just extending existing companies, extending their product lines. So for example, Google Flights and Google Health, these are completely new lines that Google did not really have expertise on. So any company that plans to extend and do something new that is they don't have prior experience on can be considered as a new product development. Let's have a look at why traditional A/B testing is so challenging for new products. First of all, there is no base to iterate on, which means that if I, as a product manager, want to run an A/B test, I don't have users, or I have a very limited set of users to begin with. And with nothing in place, it is very difficult to experiment a newer version of or newer iteration of that particular product. The third thing why we think it is so difficult is because there's no prior definition of success. So say, for example, you do want to launch a new product, or say, for example, a new website, there would be no prior website to compare it with, which is why A/B testing poses such a big challenge for new products. We at Booking.com were also faced with a similar challenge when we started working on new products, and which is why our team came up with something called as an NPD testing framework, which stands for New Product Development Testing Framework. So step one for new product development testing framework that we defined was to really get our qualitative game strong. So as you can see here, the idea here is to really focus on qualitative data and using extensive research to get all your product basics in place. So the idea here should be that we need to define your product metrics, you need to define your product vision, your mission, and also the criteria for success of your product. All of these should be put in place, as well as product principles. All of those should be put in place before you actually start the actual development of your product. Something that you can also use and leverage in this phase is use qualitative metrics as a proxy for quantitative metrics. For example, user satisfaction. So on a scale of 1 to 10, you can ask your users to rate your product, or any kind of upvotes and likes, or any kind of these metrics that will help capture the validation of your product from your users. The objective of this phase is essentially to maintain a high level of product quality before you actually roll this product out to users. The higher the quality is, and the more you test this product, the more you get feedback on your product, the lower is the risk of your product failing. And safeguarding your self-interest, it makes a lot of sense to spend a lot of effort and time in this phase. It is one of the most important phases when it comes to new product development. The second stage and the second step is to really establish foundations. So here, I think, as you can see in this image, there is a final product which has 4 modules. What this stage includes is that you decide on your MVP. Now, in traditional product management, we say MVP as a minimal viable product, but in this case, I would call this a minimum version of your product, because in most cases, we want to really define those products or those modules that actually work well with themselves. In order to define an MVP, I think one of the ways to really look at it is which are the basic essential modules of your product that need to function together in order to make sense. For example, one without the other would probably not give you a complete picture and would not give you a whole understanding of for user value for your users. So this is how you define your MVP, is basically choose those modules that only work together and only when given in context, working with each other, give and explain the entire picture. An example for this is if you look at the Booking.com hotel page, having the hotel details and the hotel image is absolutely essential for a hotel page. One without the other would probably be incomplete and would probably not give a sense of value for our users. In that case, I would define both the hotel details and the hotel image as an MVP version of my foundational product. The second bit is to actually use this MVP and launch it via A/B tests. Now, this is not in a traditional sense the usual A/B test. but to use a non-inferiority as a success metric. In this case, what we are doing is we are defining a non-inferiority threshold. By that it means we are saying that we will make this MVP, or we will make this this base product live if we do not break anything. So this is more not to increase the chances and revenue of your product, but it is to minimize losses. The approach you want to take here is you want to be safe, and you want to play it safe, and you want to make sure that you're not breaking anything while establishing the first base of your product. In this case, in the second diagram, we can see that there's MVP, and we will only start with the green portion and the modules that we had selected, and we introduce this as a base, and we make it full on only if we see that it is not hurting any metrics. Once this base is in place, the second step and the most important step is to iterate and measure success. And now, once you have the base in place, it is easy to A/B test on that. Now, if you remember from the previous slide, our final product had 4 modules. However, our base just had 2. So it's now time to introduce the rest of the 2 modules of your product so that you can launch your final product as a complete product. Here you can use A/B test and usual A/B test to compare 2 versions and then launch your final product. And one thing to note with new product development is that though you can use A/B test for running short-term experiments and measuring short-term success, it becomes very difficult to really use in such a short time to reach out to a maximum audience. In that case, it makes sense to really measure long-term success. What I mean by that is you need to have a way to measure the success of your product beyond just 2 or 3 months or weeks of runtime. In that case, we should employ something called as a holdout. A holdout is a way of excluding a small percentage of your users from all the tests that you are running for the next 6 months to 1 year. The idea here is to leave out those 10% of the partners who will not see any new changes introduced in your product and compare the performance of those 10% partners with the rest of the 90% of the partners that have been being introduced to your changes daily. So in that way, what we're comparing is, after a long-term basis, after a year or so, we can actually compare how much additional value your new product has added as compared to those percentage of partners, those percentage of users that have not been receiving any of your product changes. So this is a really great way, holdouts are a really great way to really compare and measure long-term success of your new products that you have developed. Now, let's assume that your V1 was a winning variant and that gets launched in the market as a final product. Once it is ready for launch, this actually resembles the same stage of product development as we had mentioned. Now, as you can see in this diagram, that your product is ready to launch, and most of the A/B iterations that we generally do after the launch have actually already been done before the launch. So essentially what we're saying is we have used A/B test between the phases of idea and launch to actually launch our new product, something which is generally done only after the launch phase. So just wanted to highlight that how we've really added A/B testing and added value between the idea and launch phases by introducing A/B tests. A/B test is not the only way to validate new products. There are some other ways to validate new products that we have been using in the past and we find useful. The first one is the support staff. What we generally do is we should speak out and speak to those people who are in constant touch with your end users. So let's assume your customer support or your local offices or any of those representatives, salespeople that have been on ground and are speaking to your users. I think the best idea for you to validate your product is to get feedback from them. They are the people who have been talking to your users the most and can represent your users' voice as much as they can. The second one is to actually have focus groups. Here, you should be inviting a few set of limited users to your office or to an online version of your office and giving them a trial or a demo of your product before actually starting to think about development. That would also give you some very good early insights and some directional feedback that can really shape your product and the future of your product. And the last bit is a bit more a serious way of validation, which is called beta testing. Beta testing is generally employed when your product is just about to launch, but you still want to test it out with a small set of partners to get extensive feedback and weed out any kind of bugs or any kind of usability issues. We generally do beta testing when the product is completely developed, but it has not yet been launched to all of the public, but to a smaller set of users. One thing to note is that the effort and the money required to use these validation ways actually increase from left to right, which means if you're reaching out to your support staff is a low effort work, it requires less of your time, whereas doing beta testing is a high effort, high investment. It takes more of your time, and you can choose which method you'd like to try based on the budget that you have for your product development. So, a quick recap to discuss all the things that we have discussed, which is a lot of content. First one is that A/B testing is really easy and effective way to learn and remove biases. And depending on which product that you're creating, and if it's a new versus existing product, you will actually focus on different life cycle phases as a product manager. The third one is for NPD, and for new product development, you should define your MVP and use this MVP definition to introduce your product's first base, and given, of course, that it passes non-inferiority as a condition. The fourth one is to measure long-term success, which is always a good thing to do for new products, and to measure the long-term performance of your product via holdouts. If you'd like to know more about holdouts, let me know, and we can talk about that later. The last one is point number 5, which says that A/B testing is not the only way to test and validate new products. There are also focus groups and beta testing, which are completely different and have a lot of documentation available easily online for you to read. So, thank you so much. This is me, Namrata, signing off. If you have any questions or feedback, you can still reach out to me on my contact details. That's my email there and my LinkedIn profile for your reference. And hopefully you found this information useful. Thank you and bye-bye.